The last video, I discussed the effectiveness of watching the breath in terms of realizing our true nature. And just wanted to make another video instead of making that one longer than it needs to be. But let's touch on a different aspect of that, which is really looking at the progressive path to self-realization or the direct path to self-realization. Now, the direct path to self-realization is just simply being aware of being aware, awareness of awareness, or knowingness, or experiencing. All different ways of saying the same thing. The direct path, you go directly to awareness, being aware of being aware. There's a relaxing of attention. There's the defocusing of one's focus. We're not interested in any sounds, sights, smells, tastes. Not interested in any thoughts. Not interested in any feelings. Just simply going directly to awareness, that which is aware of all of that. All of the thoughts, the sense perceptions. Well, what is aware of all of that? This is the direct path. So we simply go directly to the subject. It is the subject that is experiencing the objects, the thoughts, the feelings, the sense perceptions. Well, it is you that is experiencing all of that. So we go directly to the self or the subject. And then it's about realizing what the nature of the self is, that which I refer to as I. Well, what's the nature of I? And it's getting clear. About what the nature of I is. And this only comes from experiencing yourself for yourself. Getting familiar with yourself through direct experience. Not by reading, not by listening to anyone else, but by experiencing it for yourself. Otherwise, it's like secondhand knowledge. But self-knowledge is self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is absolute. It doesn't depend on anything else or anyone else. You go directly to you, the source. So you don't look for external sources such as books, videos. Those are resources. You're not resourcing. You are the source. So this knowledge is you. It's discovered in you, by you, through you. So that would be the direct path. Now, the indirect path was what the last video was speaking about. That typically it's indirect because we're going via an object. The last video we spoke about the effectiveness of watching the breath. Now it could have been the effectiveness of a mantra or focusing on the sensation of the body, perhaps the belly rising and falling. Could be a sound like the mantra or singing bowls. Watching a candle flame. There's many other types of practices that I haven't mentioned, but typically these are practices in which the attention is attending objects. The direct path, the attention does not attend objects. The attention simply relaxes away from objects or lets go of the objects and relaxes back to its source, in which now, for the exploration of what you are to gain the clarity, now the attention remains in its source, stays, or self-abidance, stays resting in the subject as the subject. So there's the awareness, and then the attention is no longer attending objects. It's simply resting in awareness as awareness. The attention is always a limited activity. So it's the cessation of that limited activity. Resting simply as your limitless nature. Now, the indirect path going through objects is just simply like a scenic path. You're seeing more things. There's more things that you are going to see because there's the attention going towards the objects, the candle flame, the mantra, the breath, sensation. All these other practices are objective practices. These objective practices aren't in themselves liberating practices because the attention is actually always going away from the subject towards an object. That's what attention does. Attention can only attend objects. But that being said, if one finds the direct path to be not working, too difficult, then we can simply fall back on these practices that are more seen to be preparation for going directly to the subject. These practices help purify the mind. They help remove a lot of the negativity in the mind. They help quiet the mind. They help still the mind. So on one end, there's the mind that's very negative, or I like to say very swamp-like. there's some practices that will help actually clear that stagnation. This could look a lot like selfless service. So you actually taking action, more action than you're used to. Looking at these limiting beliefs that create a negative self-image. Actually doing things like positive thinking that will help build up a healthy sense of self, build up a healthy ego. This will pull someone out of this stagnation, this dark, dense, heavy state of mind. It'll help change that state of mind to now more active, a little bit more clear. But this state of mind is a lot like a lake. On a windy day, it's very active. There's a lot of agitation, a lot of activity on the surface. So this state of mind, a mind that's very active, typically called like a monkey mind, just jumping from thought to thought, object to object, or we can call this shiny object syndrome, where one is simply grabbing or attaching to this shiny object and that shiny object, endless desiring for the next thing. This seeking for happiness in objects. This can be purified with those practices. Because what happens is those practices train attention, for lack of better words, to simply focus on one object instead of 10 objects. The attention narrows and focuses on one object, the breath or the mantra, or enter the object here. So this practice will then help still the mind, help quiet the mind. Essentially that overactivity, that lake on a windy day that's very choppy, that lake starts becoming more and more tranquil. It starts transforming into a very tranquil state of mind. So we started off with the mind that was very negative. Then there was some activity that transformed that stagnation, that swamp-like quality of the mind, dark, dense, depressed, transformed into more of a positive mind. But now this mind is hungry for positivity. It's avoiding the negativity and it's clinging to positivity. And there's a lot of highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows. This state of mind is just the highs and lows. And now there's the desire to be free from those highs and lows, the desire for peace. So naturally, one gets into these practices that we could call more of the way of well-being. You notice that you have these highs and lows and this agitation and all of this fluctuations within yourself that you want to kind of mellow out, that you don't want to be controlled by. You start noticing that these highs and lows are very compulsive. And you start seeing how you're actually just on this emotional roller coaster, and you would prefer not to be on this emotional roller coaster. So naturally, there's this desire for peace. You value a peaceful mind. So a lot of these practices, we actually really enjoy. Doing some yoga, hatha yoga, might even feel more even relaxed and do some more like yin yoga or even yoga nidra, or could just be sitting outside enjoying a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, just listening to the birds. Find that you're very mindful. You enjoy nature. You start noticing that the mind is becoming more and more tranquil. So these three states of mind, the negative mind, the positive mind, and the peaceful mind, start noticing that these practices, there's different practices that help with different states of the mind. If it's very stagnant, don't feel like doing anything at all, there's no action, there's very little action being taken, but it's very dense and heavy and there's lack of energy, then there's things to kind of get it going. So it's like we agitate it, get it going, stir it up. It's all stagnant, get some movement going in that lake. But now it's almost like there's too much. There's too much. So much agitation, it's good, but now there's almost like this addiction to doing. So now we need to settle down. We need to relax. This is where people just want to just chill. We feel like we're so busy and we're on this treadmill that we can't get off of. Feel like you're good in the morning, but then the day kind of gets away from you. And now you're caught up in the activity. You can't wait to just unwind at night. You can't wait to just relax at night. Right? So you're seeking that relaxation, that tranquility, that peace of mind. So a lot of these practices to help focus the attention just on one object is very indirect in the sense that the attention is still attending an object and not resting in the subject itself. But it's an indirect way that we can still come back to ourself. So if we find that the mind is very busy and active and agitated, we can use these practices to quiet the mind, still the mind, to bring it into deeper relaxation. Because ultimately, when we relax and relax and relax, then you can see we actually are right where the direct path is, which is defocusing, relaxing attention, and the attention naturally comes back to its source. So where these practices, it's like a continuum, the stagnant mind, the agitated mind, the peaceful mind. Well, right here, this is where then the direct path kind of picks up. That all of this is actually a preparation for then going directly to you, the source, the self, the subject. Call it what you want. It's nameless. But you know without a doubt that it's you. So it's really about being honest with yourself. There's no judgment. But if you find that this direct path just isn't working, if it's too difficult, if the mind feels too active, too busy, too noisy, then chances are you're going to need some of these practices to help purify, to cleanse, to still, to silent the mind. And in this way, when the mind becomes more still, more silent, we gain more clarity. There's more clarity in a lake that is still and silent than when the lake is agitated. When there's clarity in the water, when the water is clear, we're able to see into the water. So naturally, there's more insight when the mind is still and silent. So it's these insights that give us deeper understanding. We're able to see things that are always here, but we're able to see them now. We're able to realize there's a realization, there's an understanding of something that wasn't being seen before, but in fact was always here. So there's this purification. Sometimes a lot of it is these suppressed emotions. Likewise, when the water becomes still, then a lot of this subconscious emotions, these emotions that we've been suppressing, they naturally just kind of bubble up. They bubble up to the surface, and it's like a bubble. As it comes up to the surface, then it's just poof, it's gone. So there's a lot of purification that can happen. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to do this progressive, or what I call it, indirect path and then the direct path. We can simply just go straight to ourself, gain that recognition, and then what you'll find is some of these other practices might just spontaneously happen. You'll find that this purification will just start happening after the recognition of our true nature. There will just simply be more acceptance, more allowance, more surrender. Things will just naturally arise and be seen by the light of awareness, you. And it's that seeing that purifies it. Just seeing things as they are, without any identification. So if this direct path is not working for you, then we can simply look at the indirect path, and with some honesty, just simply be honest with yourself. Is kind of state of mind are you experiencing? More of this negative state of mind, positive state of mind, but very busy and agitated? And you'll start seeing that some of these practices are more appropriate or effective for you in terms of preparation. It will be more of what you need right now. And it won't hurt by trying. And you just simply try and see how you feel. See if it resonates with you. And you'll know, because there will be this natural attraction to a certain practice. You'll feel pulled to it. There'll be a natural enjoyment that you let happiness, love, peace, and freedom be the decision maker. Make your decision based off of happiness, love, peace, and freedom. If the practice feels like you are experiencing happiness, love, peace, and freedom, if you feel more free, if you feel more peaceful, if you feel more loving, if you feel happy with a specific practice, then stick with it. Stick with it. Because that's a sign. Let that be the criteria. Let that be the sign. It shows you that it is effective. Now, the other thing that I want to point out is that the tendency for these practices, or the tendency when practicing any of these practices, is that we become attached to the practice, that we become attached to the object. What do I mean by this? So we could become attached to hatha yoga, or we could become attached to watching the breath, or we can become attached to the mantra. Any of these practices actually can become an attachment, because what happens with these practices is that they are effective. And as you're practicing, you can surpass the practice. There gets to be this point where you actually transcend the practice. Remember, the practice is just it's a tool, it's a vehicle to get you beyond yourself. But when you're beyond yourself and you are actually experiencing the happiness, the love, the peace, the freedom that you could actually be experiencing it, but not knowing that it's you. You can be experiencing it unknowingly. Meaning you're experiencing your true nature, but you're not aware it's your true nature. And this happiness, this love, this peace, this freedom is then attributed to the object. It's the hatha yoga that I love. It's the hatha yoga that makes me happy. It's the hatha yoga that makes me feel free. It's the hatha yoga that makes me peaceful. Not really. Because what's happening is the attention is becoming focused on the object. The mind is stilling, silent, quieting. And at this point, we're actually going beyond a peaceful mind. We're going beyond just the tranquility. It's actually that the activity is coming to a rest. That attention is actually relaxing. That focus is defocusing. And we're coming back to our true nature. It's like we're touching our true nature for a few moments. And then the activity starts up, this mind activity, and then we attribute that happiness, love, peace, and freedom with the actual practice, that it's the practice that's doing that. This is then making what we are dependent on something else, which is not true. That the happiness is not dependent on hatha yoga. The peace is not dependent on the mantra. The freedom is not dependent on watching the breath. The love is not dependent on worshiping your guru. It's not dependent on any of those objects. So it's very subtle to discern this, when you're practicing. But it's as if we are using those progressive practices or those indirect practices, and then we're transcending it, and now it's becoming more of that indirect path. Now we're coming back, which is simply, like I always say, it's this relaxation. That these practices are a way to take a busy mind where the activity is just object, 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 object. The attention is bouncing from object to object to object. And the practice can simply just say, just chill, focus on this. Okay, now you're focused on this. Now just relax, 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 relax. And here you are, back at yourself, where you realize that you have never left. So that's typically what happens. In fact, it was happening for myself, where I always thought that some yoga stretching, like some hatha yoga stretches, well, that's what made me feel free. That's what I love doing. That's what makes me happy. But unknowingly at the time, I was touching, there's no way to say this properly. There's no way to say any of this properly, is you're touching your true nature. You're tasting yourself. You're experiencing yourself. Where the practice, the hatha yoga, it's just as a tool, it's a vehicle to go beyond your sense of self. The practice, it's a tool to relax the activity, because the activity really is that identification. So in the practice of yoga stretching, I'd be outside or inside, there's no remembering a past, there's no goal setting, there's no storytelling. It puts all of that to a rest. And what is revealed is what you are. What reveals itself is the happiness, the love, the peace, the freedom. But without being aware of the awareness itself, then it will always feel like that happiness, that love, that peace, the freedom, that fulfillment, that completeness, the wholeness. It will feel like that is somehow attributed to the practice, that the practice is what's doing that. But it's more so that it just is an aid to help you relax. It's an aid that's helping you relax. And through that relaxation, the attention is coming back to its source. And then if the attention comes back to its source and becomes aware of its source, really it's the awareness itself becoming aware of awareness. It's not the attention that's becoming aware. The attention is the activity of awareness. But when that activity comes to a rest, then there's just simply awareness. And with awareness, simply being aware of itself, then there's a recognition. And when awareness remains aware of itself, then we can call this abidance. It's no longer a glimpse. It's not just a recognition. It's now effortless abidance, simply remaining as yourself. So, hopefully this helps. I'll see you in the next one.